had a very good look at my own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good look, Gabor, over the last 8 months.
Mm.
I've watched real and true periods of sadness,
Yes.
sometimes very, very intense sadness, um, a sense of loss.
Yes.
And I have felt fear come up in me. Uh, the fear has been that the things that have been lost, which I consider to be part of the reasons that it's so beautiful to be a human being, that I feel like those things are beyond. I don't believe this, but it's a feeling, it's an emotion. That there's a feeling that it's beyond reconciliation, beyond reparation, that the things that have been lost between us and this movement towards union, which I've worked all my work in the world is towards yoga union. Um, I see such division and so much pain. So I've had a chance to experience that. And then I've watched people around me who have been at points guides to me, who have taught me things. I've watched them lose their mind. And I mean completely. To the extent where it's almost as if it literally is a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario where I don't know you.
Mhm.
This isn't you. This isn't the you that I've known. There seems to be a real and true hysteria that's gone on in certain communities. And I also want to report that I've had an opportunity to investigate the things that I can do as an individual to manage that loneliness, that sadness, that
Mhm.
uncertainty,
Mhm.
which for me is always coming back to practice, not avoidance, but practice of being aware and calm using the breath. And especially in this time, cardiovascular exercise has actually made the difference for me in some days. Just, I mean, 20 minutes, if I just went out on a strenuous hike, that could take a day from, wow, this is going to be tough. Wow, these feelings are hard to manage. And, and anger and all the rest of it that comes up. And so I just, I've had a look at this wide variety of personal experience of emotion come up these last 8 months. And I understand why people would be upset. I don't completely understand the hysteria portion of this. And maybe you could shed some light on that from your perspective.
Boy, well, thank you for that deep sharing. There's so much there. Um, First of all, I totally get it. I mean, I've had this feeling of strangeness and heaviness and weirdness throughout at various times throughout this whole thing. And it's not even that not, my life has been that much affected because Tommy, all I was going to do these last months was to stay at home and write. So the fact that I haven't traveled and so on, I wasn't going to anyway.
Hmm.
Um, so it has a in a practical sense, it's had a marginal effect on my life. But I certainly get the emotional heaviness. And well, I have a number of things to say. First of all, I totally get what you mean about physical exercise. I, for me, it's a must. It always has been, but especially these days.
Hmm.
So if I don't bicycle, get on my elliptical, go swimming, which I will be doing at lunchtime today, you know, after a couple of days, I start noticing the disintegration within myself. That's the first thing. I was writing my chapter. I'm just finishing writing this book, and I was writing my chapter on healing. And when you were talking about this fear and anxiety that you were experiencing, um, there's something that occurred to me, which I'd like to find on my computer and quote to you, if you just give me a moment. And it's something
Sure.
that um, this British psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, D.W. Winnicott once said. And he talked about a state that he called primitive agony. And he describes this as here it is, yeah. He says, well, let me tell you more personally. So I'm writing in this chapter about my own path and how um, at times, despite all the work that I've done and all the teaching I've done and all the acknowledgement I get for the work, and I'm sure that this is true for you as well, at times it feels like I haven't learned anything.
Hmm.
And I'm feeling just as bad as I ever did, you know. And so I'm writing about that here in this chapter. And particularly this core belief that I used to have, well, very close to my core, that everybody can be helped except me.
Hmm.
So let me just cite you here from this chapter, okay?
Please.
I will not assert that I have completely relegated my self-hopelessness to the past. It can still occupy my consciousness, almost squeezing out other ways of being. Almost. But now when it arises, I can find I can be in some relationship with it.
Hmm.
I no longer identify with it, no longer make it the same as myself, no longer mistake it for absolute reality. I can sooner or later recognize it for what it is, a quality D.W. Winnicott called primitive agony, an implicit memory of infancy when I was not, could not be, held the way I needed to be. By the way, I'm suggesting that that's what you've been experiencing.
Hmm.
In our chapter on trauma, I related the circumstances. So I'm not going to go into what happened to me. You already know that story. But the Winnicott says, in the early stages of emotional development, before the senses have been organized, before there's something called an autonomous ego, very severe anxieties are experienced. In fact, the word anxiety is of no use. The order of infant distress at this stage being the same order as that which lies behind panic. And panic is already a defense against the agony that makes people commit suicide rather than remember.
Hmm.
Aha, I'm now able to say when seized of that mental and visceral agony, here you are once more, primitive agony. I can hold you, I can be with you. And that's what you're saying about the mindfulness, I think. I don't need to believe the story you're telling me, the one I made up around you. I don't need to blame others for your coming to me now or loathe myself for lacking the strength to keep you away. I can experience you with a succumbing to the meaning I created from you nearly 77 years ago.
Hmm.
I can be in the present. And so I think that for a lot of people, what you call hysteria is just that primitive agony. And all of a sudden, the structures and practices and capacities that they've developed have become overwhelmed. And then it's back in the state of primitive agony.
Hmm.
And they don't know what to do with it. And I think that's what makes them unrecognizable to you.
Hmm.
Because this is lodged as such a deep part of ourselves
Hmm.
that at the best we can do sometimes is to recognize, here you are, but I won't believe you.
Hmm.
And the problem is the people who are overwhelmed, who get hysterical, they believe.
Hmm.
They believe that it's real. And this is why I think, and I don't know in what realm these people are who have, in your words, lost their minds. I imagine they're in the spiritual, meditative yogic world. And my fundamental understanding and critique of that world has been, for all their depth, greatness, contributions, and magnificence, they very often have not done the emotional work.
Hmm. It really, what you're saying really speaks to this difference between waking up and growing up.
Yes.
And that growing up piece, often in the spiritual world, it's shooed aside or, you know, pushed aside. Well, we could call that spiritual bypass, certainly of an emotional maturity. And as we speak about, at least in the 12-step universe of recovery, there's a very famous letter written in the 1950s and published publicly in 1958 by Bill Wilson, who was the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mhm.
And he said, well, these past 20 years or so, we've learned something about how to recover from alcoholism. I'm hoping, he was expressing in this letter, I'm hoping the next wave is going to be emotional maturity.
You said that.
Yeah.
Amazing.